Okay.
You go, Mary. Here's your copy. Can I go ahead and begin?
Sure, good to go.
Okay. Well, welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
And you watching abroad. I want to talk to you about teaching strategies that will reach all learners. As we know, my area is for students with disabilities, but also for students who are at risk. And we know that students who have disability are at risk. However, not every student who is at risk has a diagnosed disability. And there are some strategies that we can use to make sure that both groups, the disabled and the non-disabled, are benefited. But these strategies will actually help every single student in the classroom. And as you see on your little agenda there, I have 4 topics I want to cover today. Content delivery, ways to include students in discussion, grouping strategies, and classroom setup. What I'd like for you to do, take about 3 minutes and just jot down in these first 4 squares your ideas, what this means to you for those 4 topics. Alright, I'm going to share some ideas, and I'll give you an opportunity to share yours and to brainstorm and think of some others. For content delivery, you know your field and I don't, so I can't tell you what to share, but I want to share some ideas to make the content delivery smoother.
Mm-hmm.
The very first thing that many of us do here at Lee is we begin with a devotion or prayer.
Mm-hmm.
Not all of us do, but many of us do. And that's actually a good thing. I read a study several years ago that said that we should never start with just the lecture. You walk in and you start lecturing. That can bring nervous type of feelings to students. So the good thing about Lee is we don't do that usually. We start with devotion, with that calm feeling. Something else I'd like to encourage you to do is simply ask the question, how are you? In my sign language class, I teach them hello, how are you, and about 10 emotion signs. That's and even in my sign language class, in a foreign language, that's the very first thing I teach them, more than boy, woman, child, mother, father, because every single day I come in and say, hello, how are you, and they tell me. And it's amazing to me the kids who will sign, I'm sad today. I mean, they're vulnerable and honest. And even when I'm teaching content classes related to special ed, deaf ed, education leadership, whatever I'm teaching, I always start with, how are you today? And in the beginning it's uncomfortable because we in America, we say, how are you? It means hi. And they all say, fine. And they expect me to start lecturing. And then I'll encourage, I'll say, did anybody get a new job this week? Did anybody become an aunt or a grandparent this week? And they're shocked at first, but it really makes a very comfortable, warm setting. Now I realize I probably can't do this in a group of 40 or more. I've done it with a group of 45, and that took up a chunk of my time. I allotted 10 minutes for this activity, but what it did is it made the students feel comfortable with each other and me. And by the end of the semester, they knew each other. Not just did I know their names, but they knew each other. And being in a Christian school, sometimes this how are you activity can lead to prayer requests. How are you? Well, my grandfather died this week. And I could say, hey, somebody give him a pat on the shoulder and give him some Christian love, because he needs support right now. And then that would be a prayer request for later on. But a simple how are you, it's amazing to me. I've been doing this for about 12 years. And that simple question, when I guide them on what I mean by that, has made my classes smoother and to get ready for the content. And here's an idea if your classes are big, though. You can't do that in groups of 250 even. So this is how you do it. How are you? On, scale of A, B, C, D, who's an A today? Who's a B plus? Who's a C? You're kind of average today. Who's below average? Who's just kind of failing the day? And you're lighthearted, but you get a feeling of how your kids are doing, your students are doing. Another day, hey, how are you doing? Let's talk about ice cream today. Who's vanilla? Just, I'm there, neutral. Who's Rocky Road? Kind of bumpy. Who's Hot Fudge Sundae? Because everything's groovy and amazing and top notch, cherry on top. Who's a melted chocolate chip sundae? You're like blasé and you're green. It's so awful. So you can have fun with it. How are you today? These are for big groups, How are you today? Let's talk about cars. Who's an old jalopy falling apart? Who's a convertible? You know, you're free as a bird. And who's a Cadillac? You're feeling smooth. And who's a Honda Accord? You know, I'm average. So you can still do the how are you with a big group. You kind of be creative. And sometimes just a thought. Sometimes we don't always have work to do for our student workers. They would have a blast coming up with categories for the how are you.
Yeah.
Just a little thought there. The beginning is prayer requests and devotions is amazing. If you include the how are you, I think that would make your content smoother. And then ending. Your ending should be the same every single time, in my opinion, because it brings consistency. I end every class, no matter what, with the Lord's blessing. The Lord bless you and keep you, make his face to shine on you, be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you, give you peace. I end every class, my freshman class and my science classes, my content classes, and that just connects with me. It's really cute. I make note cards and all the students the first 2 days of classes. I pass out note cards and they have to give me, pardon me, their name, phone number, email for week in dorm. And I for about 3 weeks, I bless the whole class. And because I'm a sign language person, I say, I give you peace. I do the peace sign. I love you all in the appropriate teacher-student way, and they get a chuckle out of that. But after about week 3 or 4, I individualize it. I take those note cards and I will say, Mary Ruth, the Lord bless you and keep you. Dr. Cuellar, the Lord let face shine upon you and be gracious to you. Third person. And then I check off on my little note card that I've given them a blessing. This semester, I did that to my advanced sign class. And I said, oh, everybody's got their first check. I'm going to start giving second blessings. And this student said, I haven't been blessed yet. So I said, oh, and sure enough, I found his card I hadn't given a little check, and it touched me. It's become part of our class. He wanted a blessing. And I realized not every student at Lee has a person covering them and praying for them. We, like Dr. Khan said, we are their parents. So maybe you have a favorite Bible verse. How do we in every chapel with our benediction? There's something about consistency. So I can't tell you what to do in the middle, but the beginning and the ending, those are some ideas. Something else to make your content delivery smoother. I use folders. These are ideas. This is how I take attendance. On here, they initial. That way it's in their face how many times they have been or have not been there. And this long line is for concerns, questions, things I want to bring up. And this is personal, private conversation with me and the student, because not all students feel comfortable sharing. And then,
so each student has a folder?
Every student has a folder. Let me show you this one first. Every student has a folder. I've been doing this about 12 years. When I worked at Illinois State University, I did this, and I was teaching a lesson on non-traditional homes and how some students only have one parent, you know, the whole thing. And then I briefly talked about some of your students might have a parent who committed suicide. It was part of the chapter, I discussed it. This student wrote in his folder, Dr. Stout, my father committed suicide. I totally related to your discussion on this. He would have never shared that to the whole class. I would have never known if I hadn't had something private for him to reflect. And of course I took that to heart and I wrote him a whole letter. I didn't just write back in here, but this is a neat way to communicate. On the other side, I have where they can keep track of their grade. I know we have Moodle and that's amazing and great, but I don't do it. If they want to keep track, they can when they get assignments back. And I also use this to return assignments. That way it's very private. And I take it, I give it out every class period, I take it back at the end of every class period.
So how do you deliver it? Do you have it in a file box or what?
I always have a bag. I have a bag for every class. That's how I do it. Every class has their own bag. And in the beginning of the semester, I staple, and they're cheap, you know, cloth bags from Walmart. And I staple the class in the room because I forget where I'm going. Teach 4 classes. So I staple the name of the class, the room where I'm going, and I pass these out. And this is how I get to know students because they put their name right here. And this is how I get to know them the first 2 weeks.
And about how large of a class?
The class I'm teaching right now has 33. It takes about maybe 2 minutes to pass out, and I'm getting to know names. And then once I know everybody, I let students pass them out towards the middle of the semester. That way they get to know each other while I'm setting up my PowerPoint. Because, I don't always get there 5 minutes before the teacher's teaching until I go in. So the students will pass them out. This one's a little bit different. I don't have the grade. This is a different class. I still have the attendance tracker. But here I have a place for them to reflect. Because this class is very much about reflecting. And they kind of share what they did, what we did, what they're taking with them, what they've learned. And then I read this and I see if they're understanding my lesson or they're way off. And so those are some just ideas. I read Mr. Rogers. I read his memoirs, and he talked about how he was a theology major and he had to go to different churches to listen to preachers. And he went with a friend to one of them to get some, I guess, your observation hours in for theology. And he went to a church and he listened to the pastor, and at the very end of it he went to look at his friend and say, well, that was awful. And when he went to look at his friend, she was crying. And she said, wasn't that the most wonderful sermon you've ever heard? And he realized, everybody's taking something different. So that's what I want you to take from this. Take what you need and use and tweak and make it your own. So I do the folders for private conversations for the students to keep track of their grades. To return assignments privately. It helps them to see attendance. And if they're not there, I hold the folder and I write AB for absent. If a student isn't in class and I pass out papers, I put the paper in the folder. I don't have to worry about them saying, what did I miss? It's in their folder. I use for some classes, I use it to reflect. It's a great way for them to doodle. If I see a lot of doodling, it kind of lets me know either they're a tactile learner or they're not getting a lot out of the lesson. At the end of the semester, I give it to them as a reflection of what we've done. And that's an idea to make your content go smoother, because those kind of things are taken care of. Another idea for content delivery to go smoothly is to have an agenda. Some professors do that, others don't. I have an agenda. The first PowerPoint on my slide is my agenda. I don't pass out agendas, but these are the 5 things I'm going to do today, and kind of gives them a map of what we're doing. Another idea, some professors give a study guide at the end of a unit. Here's a thought. Instead of a study guide, let that be your agenda for that unit. And you pass that out the first or second day of the unit. That study guide, I kind of format it like an agenda so they kind of know how this semester's going to go. That's just a thought. Also, if you're going to have handouts, as I've tried to model for you, it's hole punched and it's color coded. I suggest all syllabuses have holes in them and be color coded, have a color on color paper, because they get so many handouts. If they can't remember which paper is a syllabus, they think, oh, I knew it was orange, I know it was purple, and they look for color. And if it's hole punch, it's more likely to get in a folder. This really helps those kids with attention deficit disorder who are disorganized anyway because of the disability. Or those kids who never learn good study skills. If it simply has a hole in it, they can put it in the folder. I do this for all my classes, and every semester somebody verbally says, thank you for the holes. The simple little things that make them appreciative. I know more than just that person appreciates it. And then, we fuss at our students, I know I do, if things aren't stapled. We should give the same respect and staple things and hole punch things and use color paper when we can for them. As you're presenting, here's the idea for content. I can't tell you what to present, but as you're presenting, here are my thoughts. On the board, as you're writing things, if I have 3 theories to give or 3 main ideas, to use 3 parts of the board and not just a linear writing, but 3 parts. And encourage your students, listen, I'm going to give you 3 theorists. Instead of taking your notes linearly, take your notes in 3 columns. Sure, you'll use more paper, but it's going to help your brain. If you're talking about 2 different cities or 2 different topics, actually move your body to one side of the room to talk about this, other side of the room to talk about this. when I taught language development for the deaf, I would talk about the different theories of language development. And I had 4 parts of the room where I would lecture from. And then when I had the students discussing it in their groups, I made them get up and talk about those theories in the 4 parts of the room, so the brain was making a connection to the content. Another idea is trying to use pictures more than just words on your PowerPoint. When I taught Religion 200 a couple semesters ago, one idea was for students to draw with justice. I think you've taught that. I'm sure you've taught that class before. Religion to benevolence.
I did. No.
Okay.
I taught the Gateway ones.
Okay. Okay. Well, the benevolence class, they suggested the students draw a picture of justice, and it was interesting to see the different concepts. From time to time, if appropriate, have students using creative juices to draw the theories of draw their learning to kind of get ideas. And yourself too, instead, like I said, just having a bunch of words on the PowerPoint, what's the image you have that you want them to click to for the PowerPoint? Also, the different learning styles. We know there are visual, tactile, and auditory. If all we're doing is lecturing, talk with some words on the PowerPoint, we're only giving the auditory ability to learn. Most students aren't that way. So pictures, visuals, manipulatives, hands-on. I brought some examples here. I have a little hammer. Whenever I go to Target, I love the dollar section. That's where I get a lot of my manipulatives from my class. And I've done this before, I want to hammer this in. You've got to get this, guys. And they laugh, but they see it's an important idea. And whenever I want to really emphasize something to them, I'll put out a hammer or another kind of manipulative to make them click, oh yeah, this is important. And I wouldn't overdo it because it's kind of high school, elementary, but from time to time.
So this can work at any level.
Absolutely, absolutely. I find that one of my next topics is laughter for content. I know I'm spending a lot of time on content, but that's what you do, teach content. So using laughter in the classroom can help the content be smoother, because sometimes we get so, I know I do, I get so intense when I'm presenting that I feel myself having a frown on my face when I'm very excited. I'm actually excited about the material, but I'm so intense that I realize I'm scaring my students. So when I step back and laugh at myself and maybe, I'm trying to get this in and use some humor, use some jokes, even if they're corny. I think students appreciate them, that you're trying to make things less intense, and manipulatives can do that. Movement is very important too for your content. If your class is an hour and 15 minutes, that's 75 minutes of sitting, taking notes. So my suggestion is somewhere in the middle, even if it's a timer on your watch or on your PowerPoint, and 45 minutes has passed, or what's half of 75? Is that about 40? About
37.
There you go. 37 and a half minutes has passed, or something like that. You know that some kind of movement has to happen. Now, movement does not have to be getting up and dancing and wiggling, but it could be a simple talk to your neighbor about what I've said so far. And that simple shoulder movement, that's actually a movement. It's your brain changing it up. And discussing it, they may not even discuss, they might get off topic, but that's okay. Because when you bring them back in a minute and a half or whatever, okay, they're rejuvenated to listen to the next 40, 45 minutes. Something I do from time to time, I say, so everybody stand up. And I don't even say a word. I say, everybody stand up, and I simply do some neck rolls or shoulder rolls, and they copy me. And they realize, oh, we're stretching. And then after about 30 seconds, we sit down and I start up again. So that can make content go smoother too. I'm not saying every single class, but from time to time. All right, so let's go on to ways to include students in discussion. Well, one way is the how are you. I remember when I first started doing this, I guess it was about 8 or 9 years ago, I was doing the how are you and thought, they don't really appreciate it, and I don't think I'm going to do it anymore. So I decided to stop. And so that day I said, okay guys, good to see you. We're going to start on Unit 3 today. And a student raised her hand. She said, you're not going to do how are you? And I said, well, I wasn't sure y'all liked it. She said, my daughter was in the newspaper last week, and I brought the article to share with the class.
Oh.
I said, oh, okay, well, sure. I said, they got it. So from then on, I even changed the way I taught sign language to teach emotions because I saw the power of it. That's one way to include students to how are you. Another way to get students to pass out the folders. That's the way you get them involved, activities. Acknowledging birthdays. We all get the birthday. Make a simple note. Say, oh, Sam, noticed you had a birthday this week. I hope it was happy. And did you do anything special? And it might, some might surprise them, and others might share on and on. They just feel a connection to you. If they feel a connection to you, that kind of gives themselves permission to get connected to the class. If they feel connected to you. Calling on small groups. For example, whose birthday in here is in March? Come on, who are the March birthdays? 4 people. Okay, one of you 4 share with me about such and such theory. And that way you're not calling on one person. There's several of them. And hopefully one of them would be willing to share. Or who's from Ohio in this group? Is anybody from Ohio or Michigan? No, who would like to share about such and such? That's an idea. The 3x5 cards I told you about that I use. The one I should have brought them. The 3x5 cards. I make them give their name and their birthday. You can randomly call from that. You can make it part of their grade. That's an idea. Sometimes that's a little bit. Some people find that more of a punishment, but that is an idea. Participation points. Something that a lot of my students like is you be the teacher. After I've taught the material and it's time for review, I have on my PowerPoint, you be the teacher. And I give them a chance to get up front and share what they've learned on specific content, specific points, specific theories. And I get to correct them or add to that. And lots of times students will add, you forgot such and such. But I can't get over how much they enjoy being the teacher. I've even had requests. Can we do you be the teacher again? Some of them like to come up and share. You can do you be the teacher in smaller groups. You can break them up in groups of 5 or 6, and then in that small group they take turns teaching each other, if not in front of the whole class. I find the best way for students to be involved, I say the best for last in my opinion, is small groups. I have really found, it doesn't matter if there's a group of 20 or a group of 200, the best way for students to be involved is to put them in small groups. I call them pods, P-O-D-S, pods, and that's grouping. We'll talk about that in a minute. But lots of students are shy and they don't want to share in front of the whole class. But they will talk and be very engaged when you put them in groups of 2, 3, and 4. I personally have found if you have groups of more than 4, it honestly becomes, if you have a group of 5, it becomes really a group of 2 and a group of 3. It's hard to get 5 to really listen to each other. But when you have a group of 2, 3, and 4, that they are more connected. That's what I have experienced. I'm going to stop just for a second or 2, not just for a second, for a little bit. What are some of your thoughts about content delivery and ways to include students? Does some of my thoughts make you think of something else that you'd like to share? Because I like new ideas too.
I did a collaborative exam not long ago where they worked, it was in a 75-minute class, and they worked for 45 minutes on their own. Okay. And then they could ask their neighbors questions, and they could correct their answers. It was short, like a paragraph answer type thing, not multiple choice. Okay. And I don't know where I got the idea. Well, there was one student that I felt like it was that bothered him somehow. And I sort of generalized that to the whole class and thought they didn't like it. And so the next class, I gave them a 3x5 card and have them write, what they thought about that type of an Sam. And it was amazingly positive. Of course, you say, well, of course, they got to ask each other names. It did, but the thing of it was, when I asked myself the question, do I want exam time to be part of the learning experience? And the answer is yes, then it's okay to do that. Now, if I need to let it be a totally summative, this is the final thing I want to know,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
But I was surprised at how positive they were. But a gradual desensitization to test anxiety can be, start off with a collaborative thing like that and gradually put them more and more on their own. I think that works really well.
What I do with tests, after it's over, I immediately go over it. That way they're not waiting a day, week to get the results. My classes allow for that. But I immediately, after I collect the test, I immediately discuss, even when I have a quiz in the beginning of the class, I allot 4 or 5 minutes to go over the quiz before I begin my next content area, my lecture. Because I have found just that the anxiety goes away because they can't change it now. They either knew it or didn't. And they kind of can let that go and go on to the next set of information. Did you think of something that you want to share with us?
Well, I'm trying to, revise my content and my delivery. That's something that this is why I really want to be part of this session. Because as you said, maybe we can only lecture and we only do PowerPoints and we don't do this kind of exercise. I think students will really not profit, So now intentionally the last few weeks I really, arranged the classroom in a circle or square. We can see each other, and so I send a few guidelines for the reading, and to be focused in specific areas on the article or the chapter for the book. So it seems that this is bringing more interaction in that way. People, students, I think that obviously, as you said, there are some students who are not eager to talk, but some of them are really want to participate, and they want to share sometimes their joy and their frustration also with the class, with the material, with the article. So I think this is something that I'm exploring new ways in this semester. I'm eager to learn this.
Good. Well, we're going to talk about classroom set very soon. So the next one is grouping strategies. If your class is about, what I suggest for pods, my first grouping strategy is a pod, P-O-D, like a pea pod. I suggest for groups of 30 to about 100. Once you get past 100, it might be a little bit difficult. But for bigger classrooms, and you put them in groups of 6. So pod, in my opinion, a pod can be 4, but in my opinion, they should be 6. Groups of 6 or 8 at the maximum. So in these pods, a group of 6, if you have 50 people in your class, it's hard to get to know 49 people. But you can get to know 6 people. Well, actually 5, because you know yourself and your 5 other members. So that pod becomes a family. And they get each other's phone number, an email, and they keep in contact with each other. What I will say to my class is, if I have about 7 folders, that means 7 people are absent from my class. So I'll say, who has Jimmy in their pod? We do. So you need to decide who's going to contact him because he wasn't here today. Who has Sarah in their pod? We do. But you need to decide who's going to contact, and they take turns calling. And they do. I had a student who came to me. She said, so-and-so is not going to be in class today. She called me and asked me to tell you because she was in her pod. So they really do take care of each other. So they can get to know 5 or 6, because a class of 60 is overwhelming for students to come in, a freshman or even a junior, walking into 60 people. But if they have their pod, hey, what's up? They can feel comfortable.
Do you create the pod?
I do. I do. The way I create the pods is random. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Mm-hmm.
All the 10s meet here, all the 2s meet here. It's up to you how you want to create the pods.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you have the pods, you tell them, okay, for this activity, for your pod, I want you to work in groups of 2. So they decide groups of 2.
Mm-hmm.
And they work with each other for a small group. Okay, for this activity, get in your pod. Now I want groups of 3. So there's 6 of them, so there's 3 and 3. Another reason why I like pods is because if a person's absent, I tell them to contact their pod member before they contact me.
Mm-hmm.
Because very often they can get the notes from their pod
Mm-hmm.
person. They feel more comfortable talking to a peer
Mm-hmm.
than me most
Yeah.
times.
Yeah.
So here's an idea too. If you have a group of 100, it's hard to do the how are you and really, really mean it, besides the ice cream and the car. So they, from time to time, they can share the how are you in their small groups. They can share prayer requests in their small groups and their pods,
Mm-hmm.
and they can get to know each other that way. If you have smaller classes, just throwing out some ideas there, I wouldn't do this if it's, personally I wouldn't do that if it's more than 40. But less than that, you can get cards in the Dollar Tree, Target. I just saw these and immediately thought, oh, that's a good connector. I pass out the cards. They're from around the world, pictures around the world. They go around the room, find the person who has the same picture. And that's their partner for the day. That's the movement and a partner. That they take their backpack, everything, and they go sit together. Here's England, the Big Ben, and here's the Russian Square. Oh, it's a
So you
church.
have to have
Honey badger.
double.
Yeah, I paid $2 to get double.
Yeah.
But
okay.
not,
Oh,
you know,
I
but,
see. Okay.
but
okay.
these little cards, they're really for children. They're learning cards. This is 3 of these cards make a picture truck. So I would pass out the cards and say, okay, make your vehicle. Well, they know that they don't match, so they walk around looking for the partner. A little bit of fun, a little bit of brain power because there's 3 of them, and then they have partners. A simpler way, if you don't want to be that creative, a simpler way is to just do good old-fashioned deck of cards, you know, and you find the king, go find the jack, go find whatever you are. You have 1 partner, or 4, right? There's 4 of every one in the deck. So that's a little bit easier, and I think most everybody has a deck of cards in their house. Another idea is, for groups less than 40, say, okay, I want you to line up in a circle. A's here alphabetically, A to Z. They line up by their first, last, whatever you want to do. You two, or the 3 of you, the 3 of you, the 3 of you. Next time, okay, line up by your birthday. And that's one's exciting for them, believe it or not. Because some reason, statistically, when you line up by your birthday, if there's about 20 or more, at least one person will have the same birthday as somebody else. And that's exciting for them. You know, oh, we have the same birthday, or my birthday is April 13th. Mine's the 14th. Oh my gosh. They just feel connected by the birthdays. So those are some ideas of grouping that gets them up.
Yeah.
And it's so easy. And I've done it by height, the shortest to the tallest, and that's always fun. By where they were born, alphabetically, by the city they were born in. Get to know a little bit about them. By their mother's maiden name, you can go on and on how to line them up, and then partner up. And then another way, this is more you determining it by their test, their first test grade. So you grade their test, and you have the stack of those who did well, the stack of those who did not, and the stack of those are kind of in the middle. And then you can partner up by 3s. You know, high up, sort of, not so good. You can put them together to kind of help each other. So
But
obviously
they
the
don't
one,
know that you're doing that.
right, they wouldn't know you're doing that, no. Obviously the one that did good, you want them to influence the one that did okay, and both of them to influence the one that didn't do so great, as a kind of tutoring idea.
How they do that? How they would do that? They
So-
talk about how they answer the questions.
I wouldn't let them know how you, that's one where you dominate and you decide ahead of time the groups for this week or the groups for this month. and after the first test, and you graded them, you get an idea of who's struggling for whatever reason.
Sure.
And you would say, okay, for the next 2 weeks when you come in, I want Sarah, Matt, and John, you're going to sit together. And when we do our group activities, this is your group.
So those who did well can help the others.
And the one that did mediocre can get some benefit from being helped and also can help. So that's a little bit of work on your part, but that's an idea.
Okay.
So those are some ideas for grouping strategies. And then the last one, classroom setup. We don't have a whole lot of option for that, but I want to throw some ideas out there. If you're in a small room that has tables like we have today, an idea is from time to time, moving the tables away and just what you're doing, making a circle and talk and pushing the tables away and making a circle, or making a group over here and a circle over here, and the two groups discussing two different ideas, and you go back and forth listening to how the debate's going or whatever you have set up. Another idea for small rooms.
Excuse me, we'll go back to that one.
Sure.
You divide in two groups the entire class, and they can focus, they can discuss in one particular topic, the other one.
Right.
And then what do you do?
You're going back and forth to see how they're doing, and then my suggestion, you bring them back together as a class. This would be like a review.
Right.
And you would say, okay, I want this group to discuss and lead the discussion on social language development.
Yeah.
And they would talk about social language development, and they know it because they attended the classes,
Yes.
but they're kind of teaching them.
Yes.
And now I want you to talk about cognitive language development, and they would talk to the other group. You could do smaller groups of four groups, but the idea to push away the tables, it just makes when they walk in, they think, oh, something's going to be different today.
Yeah.
So it kind of rubs them up. Or if you're coming in right after a teacher, they can help you push things away, and the anticipation of something's different today, that kind of can excite them. So that's just an idea for small classrooms where you can maneuver things. But how about, well, let me say one more thing about the small rooms. Another idea for classroom setup is in the newer buildings, the whiteboards are not just in the front. They're on the side as well. Now the PowerPoint is stuck. I mean, it's just on that one wall. But if you can get away from the PowerPoint, and remember how I said use the 4 different places on the floor if you're going to talk about 4 theories? How about the 4 walls? So talk about one theory on this wall, one person on this wall. So the students are kind of turning around as you lecture. Somebody else on this wall, and another place for whatever your 4 things on this wall. And you've moved around, you made the students move with you, and as they're studying their notes, they're going to remember where you were. And you kind of manipulate the classroom that way with you moving around the room. Just a thought. Now what if you're in a lecture hall? You can't move anything in a lecture hall. If you're in the School of Religion or Education or Squires. So some ideas for that for classroom setup is to plan that for this particular time, my students, as you're making your lesson plan, you think, they're not going to need to take a whole lot of notes on this part. So while I teach this part, we're all going to stand up together. Somebody didn't like that idea.
That's what it sounded like.
So the students all stand up while you're lecturing. Now for some kids that's awkward, but what it leads to is when you're done you can say, listen, I know that sometimes you're tired. I would rather you come to class and stand in the back of the lecture hall than sleep in and not come just because you're tired. I understand. I've done that before in meetings where, well, on and on, so I just stood up. And just the idea of you can learn in different ways. You don't just have to sit and learn. And then you could do the same thing for that class. You could use the different parts of the space. You can lecture from the back of the hall. You can lecture from the 2 walls. Not just standing behind a podium, but moving around, using the classroom as much as you can. So those are my ideas for grouping and classroom setup. Oh, another idea for, I forgot this one, getting students involved. One of my colleagues did this. students were allowed to, every student got a stick and they would write their name on it. And he had a little can. He had about 40 people in his class. And he would randomly pick a stick and say, "Oh, Chelsea, what do you think about such and such?" And she would speak up. I personally didn't like that one. I feel like that would make me nervous. And then once he was done, she was off the hook. But it worked for him.
I did that quite a bit in methods class because it's given as a suggestion to make the students feel, even K-12 students or college students, feel like you're being fair about who you call on.
Okay,
that you're
that's a good
not
way.
calling on just who does well or just who you're trying to catch not doing well.
I like
or
it
whatever.
explained that
Yeah.
way.
And so in the methods class, it not only gave me a way to call on evenly a large group that I was only in there intermittently, so I didn't know all their names.
Sure.
And it showed them a way to get their students engaged in their
Right.
classroom, which was part of.
What he would, after, if I called on your name, what he would do is, and I like this part, he would pass the can to you, and then you would be the one.
You pick the next one.
So Mary Ruth would be the one to decide who went next. And I like that because it wasn't always him picking it, it was the next person. So that's another way to get students involved. And finally, I forgot to show you this one. I love this. It's a conversation ball. Have you seen these before? Okay, I'm going to toss it to you, and wherever your right thumb lands, you have to answer that question.
I'm sorry? Say it again.
Wherever your right thumb
I
lands,
see.
you have to answer the question. Okay, what's the question? What's the topic?
Season I enjoy the most.
Okay, what's your favorite season?
Summer.
Why do you like summer?
Well, I can travel and meet new people and learn about other people's cultures.
Okay, so if I were your teacher, I would say, well, where have you been? What countries have you been to? And I can pull so much information, but it's non-threatening. Nobody can get hurt because it's soft.
Yeah.
Toss it to Mary Ruth.
Oh, sorry.
People I admire.
People you
wow.
admire.
Well, I admire a lot of people. I admire my husband.
Oh,
We've been married 6 years.
That's great.
Yeah. And here on campus, I admire Dr. Khan. I can't believe how he's brought Lee from where he started with it to where it is now. But I also admire students who, like non-traditional age students that have children and a family and a lot of things to juggle, but they come and most of them are pretty serious students.
Yeah.
So,
That's neat.
That's good.
And then what I've done before is if you have a class, you know how some majors have a cohort where they kind of follow each other, they get to know each other pretty well. So what you could do is, okay, I'm going to toss this to you, and you answer this question for me.
Somebody else.
Or you answer this question. How do you think Dr. Kahn would answer this question? That could be fun, How would, or a philosopher, how would Freud, if I was a psychology teacher, how would Freud answer this? You can use it for content as well. So I got this on a teacher website. I think it was $12, but very, very worth it. So
And
those
it's
are
called a conversation ball.
Conversation ball.
Now you can
Actually,
take beach
icebreaker.
balls and make your own, but
That's
you
true.
can't get as many.
Yeah, no.
I guess you could buy a soccer ball.
Yeah, soccer ball and write them.
Right, your
That's
own.
hard. This is so, but yeah.
You could
My
do
luck,
that.
I would break somebody's
That'd be
hand.
just as expensive, and this is already great.
Yeah.
And they have 3 different styles. I picked this one. They have 3 different ones. So anyway, I got it. It's called thumball.com.
It's called what?
Thumball.
Thumball.
Thumball.com.
How you spell that?
THUMBALL.com. And then if your thumb lands on the white one, it says choose a panel. So you can choose whatever you want.
Oh.
Your choice.
Luan, what do you think about those exit cars that one of my niece is working with her master in education in New York, and she was telling me about suggestions, that maybe students, I can maybe distribute those 3x5 cards and require each one student before they leave the class, this will gonna be the exit card. So what did they learn in this lecture? What is something that he or she can contribute to the class? Maybe a question or maybe an insight, from. So that will be the exit card. So students have to give back to the instructor.
Yeah,
This
I love it. I love it. I do that idea with the reflection. Yeah, that's kind of the same idea.
Kind of same idea.
But absolutely, I love it because if you give them the index card beginning class or if you tell them they have to bring their own, I mean, if they don't bring them, that's always an issue.
But you can buy them so cheaply.
Yeah, I like that idea very much because that gives you immediate feedback.
Okay.
I love taking these and reading them. That's the first thing, when everybody leaves, I read them for two reasons. Sometimes students share very personal things that I need to pray about and call them. That's happened to me only once, but that one time was enough to make me stop and read. I had to get involved right away. But mostly they're enjoyable. I loved class. I'm not going to be here next week because my brother's getting married. So, congratulations, we'll miss you. But I love these. I learned, one of my friends did it only to pass back assignments. That's why. And then I was like, oh, I like this for other things too. And then got some ideas from other people. But I like the exit card. It's good.
Great ideas.
Thank you.
Good. Well, thanks for coming. I always enjoy talking about teaching. I love it.